Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to our part two of Business 501 Unit 4 review. This is corporate strategy. Now, if you haven't joined us before, you can find the links to the old videos down below, as well as a link to the course itself, which you should take along with this because this is just a supplemental bit of material. Just a reminder for everyone, I know it says down below me that we are live every Monday. That is not true. We will be coming to you next week on Wednesday, June 1st, instead of the usual Monday. It's a holiday here in America. I will say that multiple times. I also think I have it written down in the description. But now that we've done that, I'm just going to hand it over to Dr. Portales to get us going.
All right. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I hope everything is going well. As Mike mentioned, we're just picking up where we left off on Unit 4. And if you recall, we started talking about some different specific strategies that organizations can apply. And of course, all of this is after you've done that internal analysis, the external analysis. You've figured out what your competitive advantage is. So this is really the last step in the strategy process, is to ultimately apply everything that you've learned as you've gone throughout the process. So today I want us to talk a little bit about one of the ways that organizations or one of the strategies they might use, and that is the idea that they really want to grow. And this strategy can be really, really effective, especially in certain sectors of the market. And there are 4 phases that I want us to talk about as far as the growth model goes. So the first phase is the concept and development. So you have this new product or service that you're in the process of developing in order to obviously make your company grow. So during this phase, one of the challenges, or a few of the challenges actually, that we see are listed here on this slide. So of course, development of the idea, that can definitely be a challenge. You look at prototyping if it's a product, lots of testing, that type of thing. And then another challenge here is investment support for the idea. So if your company doesn't have the money to create this new product or service, you may need to find investors to help you do that. And that can definitely be a challenge within this phase. So you've gone through concept and development, you have this great product or service. Now you want to commercialize it. So what I mean by that is that we develop the product or the service for introduction into the market. So we've already tested it, we've developed the idea. Now we really want to set up our organization for success to be able to produce that item. A couple of the challenges here in this phase include getting everything set up. So organizing all of those moving parts and those moving pieces as you commercialize your product. And also market entry can be a challenge as well. So ultimately figuring out how to best market that product or service that you've developed can often and sometimes be a challenge. Also, this is usually the phase, especially if it's a product where you may run into technical issues. And I guess that's true for services, also service products, but where maybe the product that you developed isn't working like how you thought it would. So maybe you're finding challenges there, which is okay because you're just commercializing it. You haven't actually sold it to the public yet. So it's not ideal, but to find a variety of issues at this phase is fairly common, and it's okay because you still have time to ultimately solve them. So let's look at phase 3 and phase 4. So phase 3 is the growth phase. So this is where you've gone through the process of developing the product and service, and now you're really just focusing on selling that product. So companies struggle a little bit in this phase with trying to produce the larger quantities enough to meet the demand. Also trying to keep quality as they are creating more and more products, a greater quantity of products. and also expanding the market share. So really entering into that market that maybe you're not familiar with can be a challenge. And then also in any kind of growth model, there are personnel issues or employee issues. Maybe you can't get enough people to fill the jobs that you have. You have a lot of training to do. There are a lot of things that must happen in this phase to make it successful. So finally, when we look at phase 4, this is our stability phase. So here we're really looking at consolidating our market position, and and we may end up developing new products during this phase as well, which of course then starts us back at the beginning of this cycle. But what's good about this is that you've done all of that upfront work, and now hopefully your product is selling. You have all of the systems in place that need to be in place to make that successful. But of course, one of the challenges here is as you're looking at developing other products and services, you're also having to manage those and manage new products that are in the beginning of the growth phase. So that's probably the biggest challenge that we might encounter here. I'd like to stop there. This was a lot of information, and see if anybody has questions.
I'm here in the chat for everyone if they have any questions. I don't see any questions right now. Just a reminder, you can put them in the chat. But we'll give everyone just a second right now if they have any questions. All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions right now, so I'm just going to hand it back over to Dr. Portales. And again, if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat to the side, or if you're watching later, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. But I'm going to just hand it back over.
All right, thank you. So still talking about growth here as a potential strategy, there are some other problems and challenges that I want us to discuss. And it's not that these challenges or problems are going to hinder our ability to grow. It's just there are things that we want to be aware of so that we can address those issues before they actually happen if you are trying to grow your organization. So the first thing that I want us to talk about is that sometimes companies will choose products or markets that don't have a lot of room for growth. So the market may already be saturated with lots of similar products, which makes it really, really difficult to compete in that market. And just to give you a bit of a reminder here, this is a lot of why we do all of that internal and external analysis. Like SWOT, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, pestle analysis, because at that phase, we would have discovered that maybe this product that we're trying to enter into the market is already saturated, and then perhaps we would have chosen to go a different direction. So doing, as a company, doing research is extremely important to try to eliminate some of these strategy problems that we're discussing here. Another important thing to remember, and we haven't talked too much about it yet in this course, is that really any kind of strategy requires the right people. So we really depend on our employees to ultimately meet our strategic goals. You know, if we are the CEO of an organization, we're not there all the time. We're not in the really engaging directly with the customers and that type of thing. So we want to make sure that whatever strategy we choose, especially if it's a growth one, that we have the right people and they're trained properly and they're on board with the strategy. They support the strategy. And of course, the same is true with any type of leadership and management in the organization too. You need to have the right people in place in order to make that successful. Another important thing to think about is when you're implementing a growth strategy, you want to make sure all functions within your organization are in alignment with that strategy. So, finance, accounting, human resource management, the individual department strategies should be very much aligned with the overall growth and organizational strategy that has been chosen. And they all work together, of course, as you already know. So if one department really isn't on board with a particular strategy, um, the strategy is less likely to be effective, especially when it's a growth strategy. So we just want to make sure that there is clear alignment there in all of the functional areas of our organization. We also want to manage growth. So while it may seem great to grow really fast, there are lots of challenges, as you can imagine, associated with that in terms of you want to be able to manage that growth. You don't want it to explode and be too big where it becomes unwieldy and you don't have systems and processes in place in order to deal with it. So while we don't want it too fast, we also don't want the growth too slow. So we want to try to find a balance there as we implement the strategy specifically for growth. Marketing, of course, having the right marketing strategies is definitely key in all of this. And that definitely speaks to our third bullet point, the alignment of a growth strategy with other strategies. So marketing usually is a department in of itself, and we want to make sure that the strategies that we've chosen specifically for growth are really in alignment with how we're going to move forward and market. We also want to have systems in place for accounting and finance. And we talked a little bit, if you recall, about mergers and acquisitions last time. So if that is one way that we are going to grow by acquiring other companies, we want to be aware of potential culture issues. And I mean company culture in that sense, where when you're trying to merge these two companies, there are different perspectives and different beliefs. So just having an awareness of that before the merger or acquisition can assist us in dealing with those problems ultimately should they occur. Okay, I want us to talk a little bit about this idea from Mintzberg. And I think this is important and actually really, really interesting. The idea behind it is that strategy should actually come from the bottom and not from the top of the organization. So Mintzberg makes the argument that the first line employees that are working with your customers and producing and that kind of thing are actually the ones that probably have a better idea of what your strategy should be. So it's a really interesting philosophy, I think, in that personally speaking, I think that he could be right about that. But oftentimes we see strategy come from the top of an organization. So, the CEO and the vice presidents and that type of thing. But so having said that, let's talk a little bit about his theory on strategy. So he says that the 5 P's of strategy, the first one is that you have to plan. We already know that. We've talked a lot about planning for strategy development and a lot of the background work that we do on internal and external analysis. So plan is definitely our first step and the first thing that we want to think about as we think about our intended course of action. The second P is purpose, which is a consistent stream of actions as far as Mintzberg says it. So we want to be driven with a purpose. We want to have this strategy, have a plan in place, and constantly make those changes as we drive toward the strategy that is our goal. Mintzberg also talks about ploy as an important component to strategy as well. And this is having plans at the tactical level. So think of like a week to week plan in order to meet a strategy, a longer term strategy. So deploy, you want to have these tactical plans in place to make your strategy successful. And that is, again, a really short time frame, like maybe a week or a month. Think of that ultimately as having a to-do list of very specific things that you must do in order to implement that strategy. Our next P is position, and position is relates a lot to competitive advantage, which we spent almost a whole unit talking about. So position is, how does your company, how does your organization compare to the competitors, and other factors that may be at play within that competitive arena or that competitive environment. Finally, he looks at perspective. And he says that perspective is the personality of the organization as an important element to strategy. So when you think about personality of the organization, think about company culture, think about the marketing campaigns that the organization uses. Those types of things would relate to the personality. And of course, when we implement a strategy, we want to make sure that that's in alignment with the personality of our organization. So those are his 5 Ps of strategy. And we've talked a lot about a variety of theories. And I would say that while they're all important, we want to look at them in combination. Most organizations won't use just one theory and move forward with a strategy based on that. So we can kind of put all of these ideas together and combine them to end up with the best strategy for us. So I'd like to take a moment and see if there are any questions. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll just take a minute or so for you to do that if you have anything come up.
All right. Well, we're back. We don't have any questions as of right now, but just want to remind everyone that next week for our first review of Unit 5, we will be on Wednesday, June 1st. Same time as always for you wherever you are, but it's a national holiday, so Wednesday next week, June 1st. I'll hand it back over to Dr. Portlees to get us back and going.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the last thing that I want us to talk about in this session, your readings discuss in a lot of detail as well. And I think it's pretty important. And that's the idea that um, really kind of taking a step back now and looking at the strategic planning process and looking at all of the steps that are involved within that process. So a lot of these steps we've actually already talked about, but I want us to have this bigger picture as we move forward within the final unit, Unit 5. So the first step is to, as you already know, is to establish the mission, vision, and values of the organization. So every strategy and everything that you do in your company should support the mission, the vision, and the values of the organization. So this is why it's a really important first step. So a vision statement, a lot of times these are used interchangeably, mission, vision, and values, but they're really quite different. So I want us to just talk for a couple minutes here about the differences between them. So a vision statement is a goal that is really, really, think of it as a future state. So what would be the ideal thing that your company could do or would do? That's a little bit different from a mission statement in that a mission statement is a little bit more specific than the vision, and oftentimes is the how we're going to do it. So how are we going to meet the vision that we've already stated within the vision statement? And then finally, we have values, and a value statement is the beliefs that will govern the individual and the group, all of the employees within the organization. So these are the things that the company finds important, such as diversity, how people are treated within a company. A lot of value statements will address environmental concerns, that type of thing. So all of these ultimately will work together in order to help direct the way that we should go in terms of our strategy. So that's a mission, vision, and values. So our next step is then to develop the objectives. So what is it that we want to achieve? And when we think about objectives, think about them pretty long term, and that we also want to make sure that they're measurable. So we want to know at the end if we met our goals or not. That's why they should definitely be measurable. So once you've set your objectives, we're going to look at the external environment and the internal environment too. So that's where that SWOT analysis is that we talked about a few weeks ago, and also pestle analysis. So really looking at all of the changes that occur or the changes that could occur in the internal and external environment, like technology, like new laws, all of those things could likely positively or negatively impact our business. So we just want to have an awareness of those. And as we already mentioned, looking at the capabilities of our organization and any deficiencies, we can apply a SWOT analysis to that. So that is our third step. And as we look here at our final two steps, we determine the competitive position. This is the same as competitive advantage. So don't get confused there. Competitive position is basically the same thing as competitive advantage. And we've talked a little bit already about value propositions. A value proposition is what are you offering with your product or service? What is the advantage that a customer might get from using your product or your service? So once you've determined the competitive position, competitive advantage, value proposition, then you'll want to look and really, really hone in on the competitive advantage. So what are all of the characteristics that you can possibly list out that will help you market your product and look at maybe the types of skills that you need in human resources, and how do you ultimately tie all of that together? So the one thing that I do want you to consider when we look at the idea of competitive advantage is that there can be tangible assets that create a competitive advantage for us, but also intangible. So a tangible asset might be a a physical building or equipment or something along those lines that we use within our operations. But an intangible asset is equally as important. That could be a good reputation with our customers. It could be a very recognizable brand. So when we look at really digging into the competitive advantage, looking at the tangible assets that we have, as well as those intangible, are really important to divide those and consider them, because sometimes companies will only look at the tangible ones when really the intangible ones can provide a lot of value and provide a pretty big source of competitive advantage for us. So at this point, that finishes us up for Unit 4. And we'll come back next time, next Wednesday, as Mike has stated, and we will start Unit 5 and spend 2 weeks on Unit 5, and just keep plugging away and keep reading through the course. And in the meantime, are there any questions that I can answer?
We do have a question right now about the importance of difference between tangible and intangible assets. Which is more important?
Oh gosh, I think a lot of that depends on the company itself. But since we are so technology driven, and a lot of the technologies that our companies use can create a pretty big intangible competitive advantage. So if I had to say, and this is just my personal opinion from my experience, for most companies, I think intangible is more important because that can get us a more competitive place in the market that we're competing in. Whereas tangible assets, unless we have a whole lot of them, unless we're a really, really wealthy company and we have a lot of money that we can spend and do things and, create new products, I think the intangible assets are more important, in my opinion.
All right, cool. Yeah, we have someone else down here in the chat just kind of reiterating the idea about intangible assets. But I will let everyone, if anyone has any questions, if that's more if we need more clarity on that, feel free to hit me up in the chat right now. I'll give you a little bit of time while I remind everyone that next week we're starting Unit 5, and that's going to be on Wednesday, June 1st. We'll go back to Monday the next week, but we have a holiday here in America, so we're shuffling things around. So Wednesday, June 1st, part one of our review of Business 501. We got to thank you down there in the chat. So I think you answered the question properly. So I'm just going to get everyone out of here by saying, if this is your first time here and you've made it all the way through this, check out the other videos in the playlist below, and make sure you check out the course because, again, this is supplemental material for the course. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I would like to thank Dr. Laura Porteles for taking us through everything, and we'll see y'all next week on Wednesday, June 1st. Bye, everybody.
Oh, bye bye.